Let's make beautiful content babies together, Warsmith Chris.
Hello everyone.
Hello everyone.
Welcome to this. What is this, you're probably asking? What's going on here? It's two guys with flat caps, sat down, looking really
Glasses.
cool. Looking really cool. What are they doing here? You're now watching a brand new fortnightly show. Bi-weekly. I'm going to start again in a minute. Bi-weekly actually means twice a week.
Anyone would have thought, like, anyone watching would probably think that you hadn't practiced.
No, like I hadn't done any rehearsal or anything, but everyone knows that all the podcasts that I do are very strictly rehearsed. This is a brand new... This is
Warsmith Chris. He's from DZTV. He does the ECP over there. It's been going for a long time. It's lovely. Loads of people watch it. He's a celebrity in its own right. On Winters, we're doing a thing. Does that help?
If you haven't heard of this guy, he does YouTube content on the channel you're watching now. So every 2 weeks, we're going to get together right here, and we are going to talk about lore. This is a lore podcast, right? We'll get to the name in a second.
Lore, yeah.
This is a lore-based podcast. We're going to be talking all things lore, and diving deep into the mind of Winters. Some people have had the privilege of playing deep into his narratives, but now everybody gets to experience it. Everyone will get to experience what's going on in there, and that will be beautiful. So, usually, there's going to be a way for you to interact with this podcast, right? So, usually, you can now sign up to be a member of the Winters SEO community, and a couple of the tiers, give you access to the Winters SEO Discord. And if you head over there, there's going to be a special little room.
Tier 2, Tier 3.
Tier 2 and Tier 3, there's going to be a special room.
Yes.
And you will be able to ask anything you can think. Delve into your imagination, right? We will be answering your lore questions right here. Winters will be searching the vast archive of Warhammer knowledge to bring you answers to whatever you can think of. So if you're on the Winters SEO Discord, you can head over there, you can ask us questions, and I will bring them onto this every 2 weeks, and we will talk about lore. However, this is episode 1,
yes.
Right? We don't have that yet.
One minute.
Yeah?
1 minute. Can you said fast archive, like I've got something really large. So I want to qualify that.
Okay, all right.
Because yes, so just doing the ACP and the questions through the DZ, and this will be the STC, and the questions are through the members.
Yep.
And you just sold me as having a vast, not very large, but a vast archive. I like those words because you never said they were correct. My archive.
Yeah.
Just vast.
Yeah.
In fact, there might be one man out there whose archive is vaster and more wider than me, and that man might be Luton, but that's okay. I love Luton.
Yeah. I
got him on speed dial just in case I get stuck on any questions that pop up. And what we'll probably do at the beginning is, because there's lesser members, is answer as many as we can. But like, once this is the most popular show on YouTube, Warsmith Chris.
Yep.
Once we've propelled this, once we're at the Emmys.
Yep.
Okay. And Tom Cruise, he's just coming down the ramp in his wheelchair after getting himself hurt in the stunts, flipping around with the G for Maverick 7. Mm-hmm. And he's coming down like that. And he hands over the trophy for the Emmy for the best podcast ever created by man.
Yep.
When that happens, it's unlikely that you'll have your question answered. So strike while the iron's hot.
Exactly.
Because there'll be more people, right?
Yeah.
camping outside your house, taking photographs every time you leave and shouting questions that someone had written down on Twitter. It'll be like grenades coming into your house, grenade law bombs going off all over the place. I mean, your house will be shaking. You won't have to stir the milk and tea. You won't have to stir, it will just shake itself like that. So vast. Vast are these knowledge bombs that there will be explosions creating ripples in teacups like the paw print in Jurassic Park.
Just like that, yeah. Just like that. And you won't even need to shake your paints anymore. But for now, like when in 6 months' time, when we're at Tom Cruise level, like when you get to Tom Cruise level, you don't even have to talk to peasants anymore, right? You get people to do that for you. You don't have to walk; they carry you around, and they put you on things and carry you around. And they chew the food up and spit it in your mouth, so you don't have to chew food or anything. When we get to that point, yeah. But for now, go join Winter's SEO. You are watching this now. This is exclusive to Winter's SEO, this podcast, right? You are watching it now on the channel.
This.
Go sign up to it.
Right.
Yeah. I'll just sign up to it, and then you can join the Discord, and then you can ask us questions. What did you want to say? Sorry.
Who's creating all the questions that come through to the Winter's SEO Discord, which you become a member of when you're a tier 2 or tier 3 member? Who's going to go through all the avalanche of questions, Warsmith Chris? Who?
I will be going through the questions, personally curating a list of the finest lore questions out there, straight from the domes of the community. And that means that anything you can think of. You can ask questions about the 13th. You can ask questions about your favourite Space Marine chapter. And there is a caveat. Not everything said is going to be 100% factually accurate. It might be close, but I don't think we should claim right now that everything is going to be 100% factually accurate. We'll be as close as we can.
Well,
just join us in the narrative.
Well, you see, because my vast thing, I don't need to study any of that. I told you there's one man who might know more, and that's Luton. It's fine, I'm fine. But you actually have been doing a bit of Wahapedia and things like that, which is good. And you're going to be curating the questions as well, right? And fine-tuning through that genius of yours, fine-tuning this show into the greatest Emmy-receiving, Tom Cruise-hugging show on the internet. So basically, if the show's a shit, it's your fault.
Exactly. Yeah, it's my fault.
Questions.
So don't.
I can blame you.
Ask good questions, and then I will bring good questions, and we'll all have a really good time. So most episodes aren't going to start like this with a massive, pre-scripted, well-rehearsed rant at the start. But for this episode, because we don't have this set up, because this is the first time you're hearing about this, right? What we've decided to do is something a little bit special, and that is we are going to go to the greatest lore in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, right?
Yeah.
The period of time and the characters and the events that everybody knows that are iconic to the Warhammer 40,000 universe, right? Heroes and villains have revolved around
the Warhammer 40k universe.
Yeah.
The Warhammer 40k universe is just a shallow paddling pool of narrative without this major event and narrative that brings it so much depth, because we don't have a question. And you said we need to find the thing that everyone is talking about, that the whole wide world wants to know, the most significant narrative that we could to launch the show.
We need to make a big impact.
And what?
Do you want me to reveal what it is?
So obviously we're going to talk about my Space Marine Force, the 13th.
There we go.
I can't think of anything more important, and I can't think of any more questions I get asked. Where are the 13th now? How did the thing and the thing? Why did that massive thing hit the thing and the other thing? and stuff and things, and where are they after this, and what happened over here, and how did they get to the thing? They were renegades once. There's lots of it's like there's a lot, and in fact there's quite a few 13th armies out there now. So my brothers across the fleet probably want to know what's happening to their forces and how the Central Core is faring right about now. And I couldn't think of a more power. I mean, the siege of Terror comes close, Warsmith Chris. The siege of Terror.
For the impact. All right.
It comes close, but I think the 13th is just the cherry on the big narrative chocolate dripping cake of doom.
That's right.
Yeah.
So today, I'm going to step back in a minute. We're going to find out what's been happening, where we are now. I might slip back in for some questions in a bit, but we're going to let this man talk, right? So gather round.
Well, in the future, it's going to be more of a back and forward with you and I, aren't we? We're going to have let's discuss this. I like break apart some questions. Maybe one show will nail 10. Maybe one show will only ever nail one. But this one, I need a question to start me off. So ask me something about origins. Okay. So, because what I want to do is, if I talk about the 13th, then there's a chunk of people who've been following me for a while who are probably wondering what's happening in the 13th now. And then there's a chunk of people out there who don't even know about the 13th. And the 13th are my... It's fine, I've got this, Chris, thanks. The 13th are my Space Marine army. And they're called the 13th. They're not the 13th Legion. They're not Ultramarines. So they're called the 13th because... at the end of 35K was the end of the Age of the Two Empires and the Reign of Blood, Van Dyer's Reign of Blood. It was the most it was a civil war, and the Imperium was ripped apart. At the end of the Civil War, all of the Imperium converted to religion. Before the end of M35, it got a bit two-tone, and anyway, it was the most brutal conflict since the Horus Heresy. Trillions were died, and in the middle of this uprising, in the middle of this reign of blood, Xenos pushed harder than they had ever had before. So the Adeptus Terra started a new founding, a new Space Marine founding, and during a Space Marine founding, not dozens but hundreds of Space Marine chapters are forged, and the 13th founding is known as the Dark Founding because it is the only founding which the Adeptus Terra do not have any gene seed samples of. There's two known chapters that probably survived, like the Firehawks. Their rumors are a bit dodgy here or there, but hundreds of chapters, that's hundreds of thousands of Space Marines, and as we know from our Black Library lore, Space Marines could be very hard to kill. And that's where I set my Space Marine force origins. And it was set there a long time ago. And the idea was that the 13th founding, the survivors from the 13th founding, there'll be a spaceship here. There'll be a platoon on a planet there. There'll be a thing here. And there's a guy called Manus. He was the last surviving chapter master of the 13th, known surviving chapter master of the 13th founding chapters, and he started drawing them together at the end of the Reign of Blood, and it was 30 years later that the Inquisition caught up with him. So originally it was a way of playing with different chapters with my Space Marines. The other thing is it really created the narrative around my Space Marines. So the first 1,000 years after Manus dies very quickly, and for the first 1,000 years we're pretty much nomads, a couple of fleets, a couple of ships, a couple of things here, there and everywhere, barely sustaining ourselves with apothecarians that can harvest gene seed and bring new Space Marines back into the fight, and Tech Marines. So they managed to hold out for 1,000 years, and it's 1,000 years later that when they liberate their first Grand Cruiser from a Kabbalite raiding party, and in saving this Grand Cruiser, they're then left with a choice what to do with all the humans left on board, the Navymen and Guildsmen and lease workers, what to do with all of them. couldn't just let them go off on their own, they'll die. So they subsumed it into the fleet. And once they started taking and that Grand Cruiser was renamed the start of things. And once they started taking humans into their fleet, then they managed to stabilize. And prior to the Great Rift, you have the 13th, my army, and it originally comprised of the bits and pieces and relics and casts off from the 13th founding, but since then has taken on various renegades and also built up its own Space Marines using the Gene Seed and How to Build a Space Marine ABC book. And the reason why they're blue with the white helmet is because most Space Marines in the entire galaxy come from the Ultramarines and Ultramarine successors, and Ultramarine veterans have blue with white helmets. I figured after the Reign of Blood, the majority of the Space Marines they would find would recognize an Ultramarine veteran legionary, and many of them would be wearing similar liveries to that with the white helmet or the red marked for sergeants. So by the time it hits the 41st millennium, everyone's in blue with the white helmet. It's a homage to the Ultramarine veterans that once formed the core of the army. And then you also get bits of camo here or there on the shoulders or the back plates or on some armor panels. And that camo represents some of the different colors that was once worn on those armors. So Space Marine armor can be thousands and thousands of years old. So I always see the ones with all the camo patches on, like that suit of armor with that camo patch. That goes back to the 13th. That goes back to the 13th. When they were first created. So that's why if you see the second company, which is my Primaris force of the 13th, there's no camo on them at all. They have the white helmets and the blue, but no camo, because none of that armor goes back to the end of the 35th millennium. And so that's what they do there. And there's blades and things, and they have certain looks about them. And the reason why they have no squad markings or none of that stuff is deliberate as well, because what chapter symbol should they put on their arm? Which one should they put over another chapter symbol? Also, squad markings can break down when you've got 3 of one specialist in one squad because of... So, they operate as one. So that's why they look that way. That's why there's no squad markings that way. And they are a fleet that came together essentially 1,000 years after... Well, fought for 1,000 years after the end of the 35 millennium, and about 1,000 years later started taking in human auxiliaries, and since then become a very massive fleet. And I can carry on if you want me to keep carrying on, or do you have any questions? Because 1,000 years later is the gap.
Yeah, that's a big 1,000-year gap, isn't it? No, I was just gonna make sure it was very clear to people that one of the things that comes across when you... So there is a way you can get a much deeper version of this. There's a playlist on the channel where you can go through all the Storytime episodes. One of the big things that's emphasized in that... It's one of the playlists. One of the big things that's emphasized in that is the way that the 13th... the way they operate is very much like we're all in this together. We're all like the same thing. We're all this, they don't have, well, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but they don't have a chapter master for a while.
No, you're nailing the idea is...
Because they can't elevate any one person above another.
Well, they've never really had a they've never really had a chapter master because there's many different chapters. And, they're very much there. We don't have a Forge world. We don't have a home world to fall back on. So there's a very strong brotherhood there in the 13th, which runs through the human auxiliaries as well in the 13th Militarum, because by the 41st millennium, there's tens of thousands of human auxiliary troops. Because obviously when you've got a few million people in space, there's 2 main things you want to do with those people. And one of them is to work for the ships as navymen or ratings or guild workers, sorting out all the stuff, the society inside. And the second thing you want to do is generate troops. So there's very much a togetherness, and also there's a notion amongst the 13th. See, they were born out of the religious civil war that tore the Imperium apart. So they are notably atheist, like the original Space Marines were back in the 31st millennium, with the exception of the Word Bearers. Apart from the Word Bearers, everyone back during the time of the Horus Heresy didn't believe the Emperor was a god. And so by the time of the end of the 35th millennium, the Reign of Blood, there's still plenty of Space Marine chapters then, and still plenty of Space Marine chapters now, by the way. Like the Space Wolves and Ultramarines, there's a chunk of major ones that do not consider the Emperor to be the God Emperor of mankind. He is just a powerful, incredible being who is their leader, who is their emperor. You got to remember, Space Marines are gene bred for brotherhood and gene bred for loyalty. That's when the schism of the Horus Heresy was so horrifying to some. They bookmark it again and again and again throughout the heresy, when the idea of someone turning is almost breaks some of the Space Marine brains, because it's not a thing that they would ever have comprehended before. It's like waking up in the morning and all of a sudden you're standing on the roof, and everyone's standing on the roofs, and if you go outside you fall to your death. It's not a thought that anyone has to deal with at any point, because they're gene coded against that sort of thing, and they're gene coded for brotherhood and the Imperium. And so the 13th, the only core that the 13th have is themselves and their original credos put down by the Emperor of Mankind. Because again, you've got 4 or 5, or even over time, over thousands of years, you're going to have 20 different chapters bleeding into the 13th, because that's one of the things we like to do, is go, because we're a fleet, so we'll go along. We're not a Crusader fleet. We can't beat real fleets like the Red Corsairs or an Orc War, nothing like that at all. Before the coming of the Great Rift, there was only 12 warships amongst the 100 or so civilian ships for the 13th Fleet, and you can't drive that through an Orc War. But what you can do is make significant differences around the edges, particularly because the Imperium are so damn sloppy. So you can make a real difference rescuing gaps that the Imperium have left. And also in those gaps and those holes, that's absolutely perfect breeding ground to find the diehards, to find the veterans, to find the people who absolutely hate the enemy that did this to them, and you come along and beat the enemy for them, and they haven't got a planet left, essentially. They'll join you, or the ones that are... So it's good recruiting grounds too. So it serves... It's got a multi-purpose serving function, and I like it. It feels organic when you...
This is one of the things I wanted to touch on as well. So, stepping kind of outside the direct lore, when you were coming up with this idea, the way that I've got it from the lore is that the 13th, because they can't go head to head with an Orc War, and they don't have that kind of strength to do these massive things. There's a lot of mention of them essentially doing good deeds, right? So they turn up. There's been a war. There's been a massive war. The Imperium have obviously doing what Imperium do best and just sack off the peasants. Not interested anymore. There's still a bunch of whatever lurking around, whatever baddies are lurking around. The 13th then come in, and there seems to be quite an emphasis on, throughout everything, on treating humans with respect for a start, and kind of being saviors in that sense. And they will take the time out to rescue people, and even if it is because they need that as a resource, because humans are a resource to them. What made you want them to be?
Well, can I just interject there? Because on that point, actually, that's a really good point. And Chaplain Snow nails it on the head in the Chapter Master. I did a story time called Chapter Master, and it's an internal dispute between the 13th about whether they make a Chapter Master or not, right? Mm-hmm. And then word gets out to the rest of the fleet. The humans in the fleet start betting, and then a couple of people get killed because it turns nasty. Mm-hmm. So just a couple of people. Anyway. And then Sol Garrow says, that's terrible. What's it got to do with them? And Snow says, he's a chaplain. It's always got to do with them. We are the Astartes. We were created for them. We're created to defend and expand and protect the Imperium. If it wasn't for them, there wouldn't be us. So that's the thought running through the ship.
Yeah.
That's the thought running through the fleet. I've unashamedly made them good guys, but because once you snip away the strands of ideology and we come from that homeworld, Medusa, and this is the way we go about venerating our machines. Once you snip all those away, you've just got purpose.
Yeah.
And a Space Marine's purpose is clear. A Space Marine is a weapon. They see themselves as much as a weapon as a bolt gun, or they're a weapon.
Yes.
And they will keep fighting again and again and again and again, and only in death the duty end. So I made them that.
Okay.
To balance out, I have almost destroyed them quite a few times.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the rest to back them up. When they get caught in a hole, they've suffered apocalyptic losses twice in their life.
Yeah. I think one of the bits that really stood out to me. Oh, hang on, we've got a bit of lag there, a bit of delay. You carry on.
Sorry. So yeah, I'll skim over them quite quickly. The first one is called the Galmech incident. The Penitent Forge, which is a whole other story. That's my AdMech force. We're essentially sent on a death mission into the Galmech. So the word bearers themselves actually have 2 Demon Forge worlds before the coming of the Great Rift. I assume they have many more than that. Now they've got all half of the Imperium Nihilus to set up many, many more. But before the coming of the Great Rift, one of them was Meta something grad in the Eye of Terror, and the other one is Galmech in the Maelstrom. The Star Maelstrom being the second largest warp anomaly after the Great Rift, just south of the Galactic Claw, southwest of the Galactic Claw. So Galmech, Demon Forge world. So my forge, interestingly enough, fleet-bound Arc Forge, but it came with Titans, it comes with Knights, it comes with its own Forge factory ships, was basically sent on a death crusade into the Star Maelstrom to destroy Galmech, the Demon Forge of the Word Bearers. And on the way, they called out for help. Because once they're told to do that, they're like, we're loyal, Mars has ordered us to do this, we're going to do this. The end. It's the machine mind. This is what we're doing. That's what we're doing. But they didn't say call for help, so they called for help. And this happened at 38K. And the only force out there that actually helped them was the 13th. They were like, well, that's another bit of the Imperium that the Imperium are throwing away. If we don't help these guys, they will get wiped out. And that will be, in the longer run, it will be catastrophic for the Imperium. So the 13th, bound in allies with the Penitent Forge in the Galmech incident, in the assault on the Galmech system, which went horribly. And it was the first narrative campaign that I did in the deployment zone with Say Hi Paul. It went horribly, and I'm spoiling the crap out of it here, but if you want to watch it, it's old, so the rules have changed since then. But 38K, 38... M38, the Penitent Forge and the 13th go hand in hand into the Star Maelstrom and attack Galmech, and only about 20% of them get out. So that is, they basically, at the end of that, the 13th only get out with one of their apocalypse-size battleships, and that's the Invincible. And that's when it becomes named the Invincible, gets out of there with the Penitent Forge. Fast forward 2,000 years later, after M38 to M41, where we are now, just before the coming of the Great Rift, the Penitent Forge, my AdMech force, swore... I mean, the 13th and the Penitent Forge are like that. Yeah. The Penitent Forge would not exist if it wasn't for the 13th. And so the 13th suddenly have this massive arc. I mean, it rebuilds itself over time. We've survived. So that's where we get our guns and our ammo and our warships and our resupply from. And also when the 13th are in a really bad way, they call on the Penitent Forge. So fast forward to just the other side of the Great Rift. So that was the Galmech incident against the Word Bearers, 80% casualties. Just on the other side of the Great Rift, the Word Bearers attacked the 13th. And the event took less than a day, and it was called the Shattering of the Fleet. Solgaro had been overextended with some Nephilim and had gone deep into take on Abaddon, up at the 13th Black Crusade, up at Vigilus Way. So he had been pulled away. The word bearers attacked the fleet. And essentially prior to, just after the coming of the Great Rift, before the shattering of the fleet, there was 2 million souls in the fleet and hundreds of thousands of military, of human military and space marines. I always thought that the 13th were massive. They comprise of different chapters. Sometimes back in the day I used to play sometimes as Iron Hounds, or sometimes as White Scars, or sometimes as this, or sometimes as that. So I said there was like 10-20,000 space marines in there, as many as I wanted to be. But after the shattering of the fleet, the hundreds of ships go down to 100 ships. All the Apocalypse class battleships have gone except for the Invincible. The Invincible survived. Yay. In fact, we've only got 4 line ships, and I've got them written down. The Face of the Sea, the Last Spear, the Invincible, and the... not the Face of the Sea. The Last Spear, the Invincible, She Knows No Fear, and Starter Things. So we've got an Apocalyptic class battleship, 2 Grand Cruisers, and a frigate. That's it for line ships since... And since then, there's about 4,000 Space Marines left and less than 500,000 humans. And that is after the coming of the Great Rift, which brings us up to... And then after the shattering of the fleet, we went to Hope and the Death of Hope. Again, another narrative campaign that I ran, which was a all or nothing mission for the 13th to land on a world before... And this world was called Hope, before it gets consumed by a hive fleet, and rescue as many as we can to help rebuild our numbers. And I say the campaign was about them. It wasn't about them at all. The 13th play a side part. I think that's why people like that one so much, because it starts off with the 13th and the Penitent Forge doing their thing, and then the Eldar turn up. And then it turns into an Eldar 13th Tyrannid fight, and then it just turns into a Eldar Tyrannid fight. And then right at the end, it turns into something else completely, because the Eldar are there, because, Eldar. So we've had the shattering of the fleet way back at M38, and we've had the shattering, we had the Gamma incident at M38, and we had the shattering of the fleet literally 3 years ago.
I think a lot of people remember
half of the humans.
That one very, very clearly.
And a good 80-90%. And that one was on Deployment Zone as well.
Yeah.
So where are we now? So since then, the 13th have been deployed across multiple systems, and we're fighting in small numbers. So some people go this way, some people... So this is what happened before. When you reduce a fleet down, the best thing to do is almost behave as renegades. Have you read the Night Lords trilogy?
I have read the first 2 books of the Night Lords trilogy, and I love it.
So the Night Lords trilogy by Aaron Dembski Bowden, golden book. Everyone should read it.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're on an Astartes frigate, wasn't it? Astartes strike frigate,
yep.
And it's made for over 100 Space Marines, and there's about 40 on it at the start. So, and they've been operating for thousands of years like that. So this fleet cuts down into 3 separate talons and has gone out, and the main part of it with Locke, Solgaro, and Callias Tomb is in the Saslau system. And in the Saslau system, there's been Genestealer cult uprisings and Tyrannids and some other stuff to deal with. That's towards Tau territory. Then Morsus and many of the Nephilim turned up not during the Gehenna campaign, but literally about 5 or 6 months ago during the end of the Gehenna campaign. And also you've got Talus and Maven, and they've been staking out the Hendris system and a number of systems around Hendris after the Aranta campaign. So, excuse me, what essentially I've got is I've broken the fleet into 3 separate parts. And I know where the characters are, and I know which area of space each character... 2 of the parts are in the Orpheus system, and 1 of the part is in Segmentum Pacificus. So that's where we are. And I've got an idea. There will be a campaign coming up with the Saslau system and some of the planets there, because that's where Solgaro is, and everyone wants to know.
We've got to know
where
what's going on
Solgaro
there,
is and what he's doing and what's going on.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, we can't really go into any. Have you planned a future for them, or is the plan going to be let's see how let's throw down campaigns and see how they evolve?
Well, no. So one of the beautiful things about doing this channel is the narrative was never that deep. So I, like many people out there, let the games I play help tell the future story. So I know where bits of the fleet are going and I know what the general plans are, but how it works out, I have no idea. Because I know what games I'm playing next with them and why I might be playing with them. Sometimes they're combat school missions. I did a 13th versus the Blood Angels combat school mission with Sultan, and I did one again recently. So sometimes they're just practicing. But the good thing about a fleet split up all over, you can do what you want with them. But I've deliberately not... a lot of people ask me about the Gehenna campaign and the Hendris campaign, and I deliberately didn't put them in there right until the very end because... my narrative wouldn't let me commit them to a large campaign after the shattering of the fleet 3 years ago. What they do is what they do. And so they swung by at the narrative event right at the very end of the year. So there is a call.
Second company, wasn't it? That came as well to that.
But yeah, I've spoken, that's it, exactly it. And I've spoken to Second Company were there in force, and there's also a Broken Company there as well, led by Sol Garrow. So Broken Companies are rare, but... so is Sol Garrow. But I spoke to a number of people there, and I've spoken to a number of people at events that have fought on the same planets that we fought on, in the same system. Or people have got their whole narrative. So I'm one of those, and I do believe there's quite a percentage of us out there whose narrative evolves over time. Which leads me to, because I get asked the question again and again and again, how do you start your own narrative? So we'll start with you, Chris. If someone wants to, like, okay, I've started 40k and I want to add a story about this stuff, or someone who's been playing with their, I don't know, Tau for the last 3 or 4 years and hasn't really done anything and wants to, because once you start investing a little bit, even a tiny little bit of story into some characters here or there, the game will mean more for you. Yeah. And those feelings will magnify and amplify over time. And it's another way for you to engage in your hobby more. And you know what? If you give them a little bit of juice and 6 months' time it doesn't, then you haven't lost anything. So I would encourage everyone who hasn't even sprinkled a little pepper on the cake, a cherry on the top, to do so. How would you encourage people to start that journey?
I think the first and most important thing is you don't have to go into it knowing everything. This is exactly, if you look at 40k itself, it wasn't anywhere near as deep as this until they started investing in Black Library writers and fleshing everything out. And the same Winters just said there. So what you can do is just pick your warlord, for example, or pick your favourite model in your army, and just start to think about why are they here? Like, what are they doing here? And certain factions will kind of push you straight into that, give you an answer straight away. So if you're playing a Space Marine faction, well, whoever your warlord is or whatever is part of an elite military force, and they must have done something to be promoted to that level. So then you can start thinking about what that was. I mean, who have they been fighting? What's got them there? If you're not playing Space Marines, if you're playing factions that are a bit more sort of mysterious, it gives you loads. You can literally go nuts. Anything you can think of, you can do. We've got Eldar that live indefinitely, who could have done all kinds of things. You've got Gene Stealer cults, which are going to have a much smaller sort of time frame to work with. This is just a normal human's life. You can quite literally have someone who's just having a terrible time and get lured into this, and this is how it starts. But I think once you've laid only a tiny bit of groundwork, a tiny bit of just something to give them a bit of depth, the rest of it can all come out in games. And we've seen this from the narrative events that we do. So many things have been happening there, like great fights between two warlords, and they come away saying, "Oh, that's amazing! I'm going to put a sword on his base where he managed to disarm him at the end and did this or that, or I'm going to have a Tau skull on my trophy rack now because that was an epic battle," or whatever. so many great things like that have come out of these. But that can come from anything. That can come from a casual game with your mate. If you have a moment where you go, that was absolutely epic. We just had a massive fight. I can't believe you rolled that. I can't believe you did that. Or that wasn't expected. You start building things from that. Then you just flesh it out. And that, I think that's the beauty of playing narratively. What it's done and what Winters has done with the 13th now is that he is in the very fortunate position where he can play a lot with these characters he's created. And now there's genuine peril now, right? So there are characters that all the subscribers have seen. Lots and lots of people watch these videos. They all know these certain characters, and they are, depending on what you do, they can be on the line now, which makes things very, very interesting. I think for you especially, with so much weight behind some of these characters and so many battles, you can go back and watch what happened in them. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I think if you want to get into this kind of narrative building thing, I think the first thing is don't worry about, if you're no good at writing stories, not everyone has a talent for it. You don't really need to. You just need to have an idea of what they've done, and just remember that when you're playing. Just remember that in context of what happens. Do you agree with that one? I think that's the way.
Yeah, that's your narrative. If you want a narrative to evolve, it will evolve the more you play. And if you want to start with a narrative, then Chris says, look at your warlord. I would say as well, give your warlord a name if you haven't.
I should have said that.
Maximus such and such. Just give all your warlords a name. One of the things that I advise as well is give them a bad guy. So every superhero movie or war movie has an antagonist. The Nazis, Thanos, whatever. The Empire, the evil Empire. Everyone's got an antagonist. So give your force something that they really like to kill. And it could be the mate that you play against often. But if you give them something that they are connected to somehow, like they really hate this such and such. So you give your warlord a name, give them an antagonist, and maybe they never really fight the antagonist at all. Maybe you're always fighting your mate's death card, but your true antagonist is Harlequin. But give them an antagonist. You do those two things, and a story will immediately start writing itself straight away. Like, why are they the antagonist? What happened there? Da, da, da. Yeah, it's very simple to and just let it write itself. And some people I've seen write reams and reams and reams and reams and reams and reams. So it's great. There's a whole thing. My main thing is, my main shout out to people is, it's a way you can engage with your hobby more.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do it.
It's another aspect as well. You can be into you might be into painting, you might be into playing, you might be into painting and playing, and modeling, but also story crafting as well. I guess people do it in all fields. There's fan fiction and stuff like that, but this is rather than being fan fiction, this is fiction for your own. This is something you own. You own the whole lot. You own the characters and the story behind it. So you really can make it yours, and that's an awesome thing. And I try to do that with every army I've got. I at the very least have that named character. My Iron Warriors, who have actually clashed once with the 13th. How
did it go?
It didn't go great. You rolled lots of 6s for damage and destroyed all my Iron Warrior vehicles at the start, and then the very last thing that happened in that battle, I was trying to think, it was either Chaplain Snow, or it couldn't have been Solgar himself. I think it was Snow. Yeah,
I think it was Snow charging
and
down
we met
towards
in
your
the middle
warlord.
there, and that created a moment, you see, because I failed the charge there, and I think that was a moment of rather than failing the charge, I think that was a moment where Warsmith Remicles had looked at the situation. He wanted to square up to this hero. He wanted to fight. But I think he realised that he might not win. And rather than make the jump, him and there was a couple of other sort of named character units with him, just got out there instead. And that was an interesting moment to finish the battle on. It was told by the dice. I wanted to charge. I wanted to try and make a heroic stand and fight like a champion of the 13th. But we had just been pounded into the ground. So at the end of the day, Remicles couldn't overcome the kind of the losses. And rather than throw himself away, he, like a true villain, he said, "You know what? I think I'll get out of here and we'll live to fight another day." But that was fun.
And so we didn't just play a game, but you created a story and a memory.
Wonderful.
It's lovely. Perfect. Yeah. So have you smashed through some of the 13th story times recently? You got a fave? You got a favourite character? Anything like? You got any questions? Like, you have me, the author here.
We're at an exclusive.
Sat here. Yeah. Like, this is pre-Emmy. Like, you can ask. Tom Cruise hasn't knocked on my door yet, but I need to check soon. I'm sure.
He's coming.
But yeah.
Can you sign my book, please?
Go on.
Can you sign my bra, please? Yeah.
Good. I signed this one that I've got on and just send it to you.
It's I went through a refresher. So like I said, if you're watching this and you're like, what is this man rambling about? He's saying a lot of words. There is a playlist, and I went through that playlist again to see how much of I've watched some of it before, but this time I just played the whole thing, and even was listening to the Penitent Forge stuff.
Brilliant.
And actually, there was a question I was thinking of earlier, and that was, it's interesting that those two highly narrative armies that you've got, the Penitent Forge and the 13th, the AdMech side of it kind of mirrors the same thing in the fact that you've got this idea. Maybe you're just a big fan of this sort of archetype of characters, but it's got the same thing of that they're kind of deliberately outcast. They're not going to bend. They're not going to change to the rules they've been set. They've got their units. They've got their stuff, and rather than conform and become part of the accepted AdMech presence and enjoy all the benefits of that, they kind of force themselves into becoming just like the 13th. This kind of, we don't quite fit in, and that's how they merge together, I guess. What made you think to go down that same sort of route again with the Penitent Forge?
Okay, so that's a good question. To my mind, that's a good question. I'll tell you how we got there. So obviously the Space Marines came first because Games Workshop didn't release any AdMech models for a long time. In fact, the first Mechanicum models that they released were for 30k after the launch of the Horus Heresy book series, which I think started in 2000 and
something around there,
something like that, or maybe 2004. So it's nearly 20 years ago. And then a good 3 or 4 years into that, they released AdMech figures, maybe 5-6 years into that. And they were the first AdMech figures that Games Workshop had ever officially done. Before then, you'd see lots of conversions online and things. So I snapped them up because I've been a big fan of AdMech lore, but we won't get into that for now. But a massive fan of the AdMech lore, and always feel that it's underrepresented in 40k canon. But that's fine because it's really hard to write from the point of view of Siri, or Siri or Alexis. It's hard to write from their point of view.
Yeah.
So then I snapped all of them up and bought every single Forge World model that I could. And then when the books dropped, because it dropped in two, it dropped to the Cult Mech and Scutari in 7th edition. Yeah, I bought both of the books. This is before Games Workshop gave me stuff, and bought every unit as it came out, as I could get it. And then I am a narrative bunny, so I've got this AdMech force, and there was a big hole in my narrative. There was a big hole in the 13th narrative, which was, well, where do they get all the stuff from? And if you actually look close on some of the firstborn guys and the dreadnoughts and the vehicles, there's actually some chaos stuff on it. Now, we haven't turned to chaos, but there's plates or armors or bits that have come off of chaos sprues because they've repurposed it, because they've had to. But there isn't much, but there is some of it. And plugging the AdMech into the 13th story, so, well, these two are allies. So, and they're both, and at the time as well, they were the only two armies I had. I had my Space Marines, which are played in all the different flavors, and then I had the AdMech. And when I started the channel, that was it. It was just those two. So, well, they have to be fleet-based. So it started off as a fleet base. And then it was like, well, then I could turn them into a Penitent Crusade. I said, well, they can't be a Penitent Crusade because then they would die. So Penitent Crusades are when a Forge World or half a Forge World is excommunicated for some sort of reason, and they're sent off to earn their penitence for the Machine God into the Eye of Terror or against the 13th Black Crusade, and they die.
Yeah, it's the
Penitent
same
Crusades
as
die.
similar to the Space Marine ones, where you're not allowed to replenish your numbers while you're on a Penitent Crusade. But if you make it through, you might gain favor again, and then you can start recruiting again. But yeah, it's a good way to kill off some people you're fed up with. Yeah.
Space Marines have all sorts of ways of doing it. Graham McNeil nailed it with the Uriel Ventrius, which was originally a trilogy with the Ultramarines, but it's now, I think, 5 books. And Uriel and his mate went off. So it's a thing in 40k canon. So I said, like, well, I could make them a Penitent Crusade, but then they wouldn't be fleet bound with the 13th. So, they had to be a Penitent Crusade that got forgiven. Well, how did a Penitent Crusade get forgiven? Well, they found an STC or a couple of STC fragments on their Penitent Crusade. And that's what I've written into the lore. And then it was, why were they... So the models lent me that way because I had the Space Marines. That's how the Penitent Forge worked. And the models lent me their origin story, which is quite simply, I've got a lot of 30k Mechanicum stuff. And why... And I would like to play it in 40k, and I would still like to play it in 40k, and I'm looking for the day when Games Workshop releases rules to play the 30k AdMech stuff in 40k. And so the lore for the Penitent Forge is quite simple, that at the time of the Horus Heresy, on Mars itself, at the very start of the heresy, they descended into civil war. And quite simply, the two lines of the Civil War were divided by one fault line, which is those that believed the Emperor was the Omnissiah and those that didn't. Those that didn't believe the Emperor was the Omnissiah and followed the Fabricator General of Mars and all of those Forge Worlds fell to the Dark Mechanicum. Those that believed the Emperor of Man was the Omnissiah for the good guys. And again, another outstanding Graham McNeil book, Mechanicum, one of his best books. And I call it the Bible because it's the Bible of the AdMech. It's the Mechanicus Bible. It's got so much knowledge in there. The coming of the Emperor, which he describes it. It never ever rains on Mars, but at the coming of the Emperor, it started to rain. And then secondly, the skies lit up, and he describes it like a golden city, like our most Baroque idea of a medieval heaven descending from the clouds. It's the Emperor. It's got to be full of as much symbolism as possible. So you've got these machine-worshipping cultists looking up at a golden city descending from the clouds. And then when he came out of the entrance of his golden city, there was an eclipse on Mars, and as the Earth went in front of the sun, and for a few minutes the only light across the surface of Mars was shining from the Emperor as he came out across this golden landscape, beaming out of him, with it raining on Mars for the first. The only other time it had ever rained on Mars was in deep history. STC time was in the Dark Age of Technology. He made it rain. And so, basically the ones that saw it or heard about it or downloaded that directly, they believed the Emperor was a god because he fulfilled every single prophecy that the Emperor had set up already tens of thousands of years before. Why is there Mars suddenly appear? Here's Earth, and a factory appears next door, perfectly primed, ready to go to conquer the galaxy. That's really convenient that happened. How did it happen? The Emperor set it all up to begin with. It's very like June. It's very June. So he set it all up to begin with. So when he came, boom, they worship him. So they split in half. So One of the half that went to the Dark Mechanicum continued to use cyberthurgy. And cyberthurgy, you've got the data robots now in 40k. There's no meat in there. They're robots, Castellan robots. Cyberthurgy was banned after the Horus Heresy because a lot of cyberthurgic engines, which still have brains, amniotic sacs inside, can easily be corrupted to chaos. They can easily fall to chaos. There was impossible to hurt them from other stuff, but when you've got a body screaming in pain inside of a Thalaxi shell, it wants release. In fact, there was a rule in 30k where if you rolled under your leadership, because if a tech priest was too far away from one of these things and they rolled under the leadership, that model would become your model.
Wow,
and you could fight. It breaks free of its programming. So all the cyberthurgy and auto reductor and all that stuff was banned. So I made the Penitent Forge, one, absolutely breathtakingly loyal to Mars and to the Emperor, and two, believe that the Emperor is not a god, which is what the bad guys believed, and use cyberthurgy. So at the end of the Horus Heresy, no one could ever doubt the Penitent Forge's loyalty all the way through. It was the House of the Dragon previously. All the way through, they fought 100% stalwartly for the Emperor, for the Imperium, for the Mechanicum, for Mars, and for their Omnissiah. And at not one point did their programming break. At the end of the Horus Heresy, they were told that the Omnissiah is a god and get rid of all the cyberthurgy. And they said, okay, because we're completely loyal. So they mothballed and cocooned all the cyberthurgy stuff. And they were told, you are now a penitent crusade. Prove that you're loyal. Go until you die or you find something great. And in a dramatic turn of events, I allow them to find something great. The good guys actually found something, some key STC data out in the Halo stars. So that was 1,000 years later. So they turn around and for 1,000 years come back again. And they get to Mars and they go, there you go, there's something great. And Mars goes, okay. So Mars says, okay, you're no longer a penitent crusade. We'll call you the Penitent Forge. You've lost all your rights, all your lands, all your stuff. Here's all the stuff you need. Go. And so there's literally floating continent cities in space churning out titans and this and that and the other. And they will go where Mars orders them. They follow the Martian doctrines. And if Mars says go to Galmech and die, they'll go to Galmech and die. The machine mind, we're loyal, we're loyal, we're loyal. If the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Adeptus Terra, or the Fabricator General tells us to go there, we go there. And so that's where their narrative came from. It was spurred through my evolution into Mechanicum. It spurred through my want to try and fit the 30k models in whenever I can in narrative games. I'd stick them in and hoping that they get released, some rules for them for 40k. And it came about from the fact that they need to follow my 13th around or overlap with my 13th. And I am, at my core, staunchly loyalist. So the two forces that I was playing were going to be staunchly loyalist no matter what. And ever since then, it's been a descent into madness and chaos and filth and anarchy and dogs and cats living with each other.
It's been a nightmare. Because there is another faction we could talk about, but maybe not on this particular one. Let's stick to the loyalist boys from the channel at the moment.
Well, the end of all things are just Death Guard. There's a religion running through them, but they're just Death Guard. The Cadian dynasty is deliberately open. I've got some ideas with the Tyranids and where I want to put them and what they want to do. Splinter of High Fleet Kraken, easy to do. Grey Knights, easy to do. Custodes, easy to do. Knights and Knights, easy to do. Orcs, Murphy's Wa. The evolution to their background came out of the narrative campaigns that we now know where Murphy came from, and it's all Mikey P's fault in Saga of the Red Frost 2. And we know when he died, and we know when he in 27 minutes, and we know when he came back again.
So they've been really really
so Murphy lives
sort of at a granular level, led by game outcomes, haven't they? Compared to other ones.
Yeah, Murphy. Yeah, the orcs right from the ground up. I deliberately didn't start with a narrative, but I did start with named persons, and people that they really hate, and some beef there. And so they're the first one whose narrative is completely evolved through how I played. And people who watch the channel know the narrative, and they know as much as me. Which is why the Cadian dynasty, my Necron dynasties, are deliberately, what's the word? Obfuscated. Yeah. They're deliberately clouded.
Leave them a blank
because
slate,
it's just natural that way.
See how it goes. Nice. It is.
I'm trying to show people how to do it and trying to take people with me and trying to show people this, that, and the other. And honestly, from my point of view, I get to play 40k a lot, but people comment on my... So I can feel me taking people on journeys with me, and I can feel people responding back to me about... And it's just... I'm so lucky to be here doing this. My narrative resonates with not just me and my close gamer group. It resonates with a number of people, thousands and hundreds of... It resonates with millions of people. It probably resonates with half of the planet, which is at least more than 28 million people. Yeah. Because like I said, there's one lore master who perhaps knows a bit more than me. It's Luton. So it's out there, and I love that about this. I can see why people like Tom Cruise make 78 Maverick movies, which he's clearly going to do, because the last one made him a trillionaire.
Your energy just radiates out into the solar system. It's reaching, it's leaving the Milky Way. It's probably making it into in this universe of infinite parallel universes. It's probably reaching the real 41st millennium parallel universe. You might be influencing the real living, breathing emperor of mankind. I can't see why that wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, I can't see. No, I'm definitely. That's the word, isn't it? Yeah, I'm an influencer. Should I sell toenails?
Tea that you've already drank.
Just pick. People, they you have signed pictures, right? I should just sell signed pictures, £100 each. Like I could personally sign it with love to Sandra from Honeybun, and then there you go. And Honeybun can give it to Sandra, and Sandra go, "Oh, that's Winter's SEO. He met Tom Cruise." And I should do that. I think
that podcast he does with that. Who was that guy?
He's gonna
he did a podcast on that. I can't remember his name. Jawbox Tim or something. Yeah, Mikey. Mr. AP Byrne. That's it. It's one of them.
Mr. AP Byrne.
Rude. Anyway, I think we have.
I think we nailed it.
I just want to explain to everyone as well that we, as with all these podcasts, because the platform we use, there is a tiny bit of delay. So Winters isn't being rude. If I'm trying to say something and he doesn't hear me, it's because there's a delay on it. He's not. I mean, he is being rude. He's deliberately not letting me speak, because what have I got to say that'd be worth anything? I'm not the one literally changing the course of the universe with my emotion and knowledge and my influence.
Well, you will be, because you'll be curating the finest of the fine questions. You'll be skimming the cream off the top of the milk jug, and together we'll be drinking that cream and creating one of the. We'll be answering questions that have never been asked before, settling debates. Once and for all, who's the best Primarch, that sort of stuff. We'll be settling it. We'll be locking it in a safe, dropping it in a trunk, and throwing it in the bottom of the river. With chains on it.
And one of the things we've also said is, in terms of the length of these episodes, it's going to be based on how cool the questions are. So if you give us questions to really eat like a big rump steak, then we're going to be chewing on that steak for a while. Just saying. Just chewing away on that steak.
Chewing. Munching. Is there like a general, like, what sort of questions would you, another way of putting it is, what kind of questions would you hope to see, or what kind of questions would you ask if you were waving the
kind of questions that I think that are going to really work,
which you are,
is we can split them into two types, right? We can split them into these things are not concisely told in one place, right? So you need people that have read, a lot of this is with the Horus Heresy as well, someone who's read the whole series 3 times or whatever madness. There are bits that you piece together from different books. It's not told explicitly in one section, right? Questions that ask those kind of things, the things that are suggested in the background, the things that we know happened, but where are they discussed? Where can we go into depth? That's one set of questions. And you can ask things like, we did one on the ECP about how Malkador felt was the Emperor essentially just a baddie. Was there any shame in what was happening? Was it the Horus Heresy? Was it clearly just a big horrible setup? Things like that, which are answered across the books, right? They're answered in little pieces. The other type of question you can ask is...
Yeah, it's like...
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
It's like... that was Are We the Baddies? And they've got skulls. There's skulls everywhere in the Imperium. Are we
the baddies?
You know, it's a giveaway.
The other type of question, which I think is going to open up for some really interesting conversation, is some what-if scenarios, right? We've done... In fact, if you're a subscriber to DZTV and have the ECP back catalogue, there is an episode where Winters went into quite a lot of detail about who he'd pick for the Horus Heresy when given. We can maybe revisit that at some point now that some time has passed. You know,
that was a good question.
Yeah, so questions like that.
Because you said, like, how, if you could take 9 legions to take over the galaxy, which 9 would you take and why? And I said I only need 5. Yes. And that was an hour of me ranting, basically, about why I only need 5.
But it was great fun.
And then I conceded that maybe 6 or 7 if you want some extra stuff, 6 or 7. But I'm convinced I can do it in 5. But, a couple more legions never hurt anyone.
Yeah, just a legion.
But that was a good question, The what ifs, I like
those kind of things. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there. But you should be if you.
But I want to discuss it. I'm interrupting again. I want to discuss it with you. I'm really looking forward to having a genuine conversation and seeing where it goes. And I'd also be interested to see a genuine conversation come up in the comments sections, which we might be able to respond to later. Because we've also spoken about maybe doing, once we've got this under our feet, maybe doing some of them live or once a month live or once every other month live. And then maybe it's a whole conversation that you and I can have with the community talking through it. Maybe it's an organic law. So this is where it starts. And I don't know where it could possibly go, the greatest show on earth. But I'm hoping it could become the most greatest orgasmic law conversation that the community has ever had. And if it gets there, it's because of you. And if it doesn't, it's also because
it's me. It's because of me. No one else is to blame. That's fine. But it's going to get there. I've already contacted Tom Cruise. He already has got the gist of it. He said, "I love the idea, guys. I just injured my arm doing the next Maverick film, and but we're going to get you on. You're going to get an Emmy." He said it already. So,
wow, Tom, how did you injure your arm?
I got hungry. I was hungry. I wanted to impress a girl, and I was hungry, and I said I'm going to get her a cheeseburger, and I flew in my jet, and I placed the order over the phone, and then I flipped the jet upside down, and I flew right down close to the ground, and then I opened the canopy, and I put my arm out to grab the cheeseburger, and I banged it on the straw dispenser. It's just how it goes.
Okay.
So,
because when you said you were hungry and you hurt your arm, I was picturing the reason why your arm hurt is because you'd eaten half of it, and so I'm glad you still have the other half of your arm, Tom. Nice to talk to you, by the way. Loved Maverick, and actually think The Edge of Tomorrow is a very underrated movie, and Oblivion. Both really good movies.
Both great films. Sorry, I mean, I talked to Warsmith Chris earlier, and he also agreed they were both really great films and were underrated, not overrated, underrated.
Well, because for a moment there, Tom, you sounded like that fat twat.
Yeah, he was so frustrating to talk to that I ended up, because I'm an actor, method actor, I ended up picking up his voice, his horrible voice. Anyway, see you at the Emmys.
Tell me about Scientology. Talking about narrative events, Tom. Tell me about Scientology. Aren't we all from another planet?
Oh,
by
that's
the
right.
Lizardman? Isn't that
actually,
thing?
it's his name is Xenu, and he lives in the middle of Xenu. He lives in the middle of a mountain, and he's trapped in a stasis field powered by battery. You do realize we're now going to get. That's it. We're going to get. We're off the air now. They send Scientologist people out there. They're going to know that we've talked about it, and that I pretend to be Tom Cruise, and they're going to. That's the end. They're never going to see us again. We're never going to be seen again.
This is gonna get out to, like I said, half the planet. There's at least more than 28 million people who are going to listen to this now. So this could be the last thing we created. What is the name of this piece of genius, by the way? What are you calling it? What are we calling it?
This is called, as you'll see at the start, this is called the STC, right? Levels, right? Layers. Yeah. The STC. Now, layers. It could stand for super tedious chat. It could be story time podcast. It could be slaps the cousin. Stinky. Yeah. Stinky tractor camera. It could be carrot.
Stinky tractor carrot. Sorry, no, I think I interrupted your big reveal. What is it actually called? Sorry, I've forgotten it. STC.
Standard Template Construct. That's the name of the podcast. Oh wait, no. The Story Time.
What is
Cast is what it's called. So
what about Storytime? 1 minute. Storytime podcast. Sure.
Yeah.
Storytime podcast, not Storytime.
It's Storytime
cast. What is a Storytime?
What it is
cast?
Is if you really want to make a name that's like layers, because it's a 40k lore podcast.
Yes.
And STC is a very important part of the 41st millennium, right? Would you agree? A lot of what we have in the 41st millennium is because of STCs, right? And they're the really cool thing that if you find them, really cool stuff can happen. So why not make your podcast? Why not come up with a contrived name for your podcast that matches that standard template construct? And then there you go.
Yeah. It's contrived, but it's like story time
cast.
Pod. Yeah. Cast. And you just put a pod
story time
over there and you just throw it away.
Cast. Yeah.
Genius.
That's how it's going to be from now on. Yeah.
Yeah. Layers. I like it because then it's easy for people to remember. It's like, hey, did you listen to the recent STC? And people on the streets, in bars, at the football matches, they'll be
saying, was he talking about STDs?
Yeah.
Because that's not a good topic of conversation. And they'd say, no, STCs.
Have you ever had an STD? Because they were dark days. Have you ever?
No, just
been
the
troubled?
Clap, over and over again. But apart from that, nothing.
Right.
So I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm good. Yeah.
No. If you live anywhere near the South Coast is rife for it. My older sister is a medical microbiologist, and she's worked in different NHS hospitals around the country. She worked in London, she worked in Bristol, she worked up north, and she once worked down in Portsmouth. And when she was there, in her lab, basically a third of all the stuff that she got through the labs were STDs because of all the docs down there. Everywhere else, it was like the normal amount, like 0.5%, point whatever. But Portsmouth, Southampton, absolutely rife with STDs, you know. So, and then I lived down there for a while, and what do you know? STDs if you live down that part of the world. So, if you want a lovely STD, move down to the South Coast. If you want to listen to the STC, then tune in here.